Hey friends. So today I had what's becoming kind of a customary experience of having an idea in the morning or kind of a flash of insight. A lot of times it happens to me in meditation. I'll have a little spark show up, and I think, ooh, that feels like something I'd like to unpack on my video post. And then I have a conversation later in the day. In this case, it was this morning with a friend and client, and had a wonderful conversation as usual. And so then I have these, and some really great ideas came out of that. And just as I was sitting down to do this post, the two of them kind of, I saw the connection between the two of them, and I was like, oh, great. That's what is coming through for the day. It's an experience that I have more and more frequently where I'm like, should I talk about this or should I talk about that? And then I take a breath and I realize, wait, these things are not separate things that I'm randomly happen to be thinking about at the same time. They're actually really connected. So without further ado, the thing that showed up this morning was a little insight that a little kind of like something that zinged from listening to Sadhguru's book. I'm getting towards the end of it now, on karma, and he talks about the types of action that unravel karma, in other words, that free us from our karma, and the types of action that create more karma. And I talked a little bit about this yesterday in a different sense. Yesterday I was talking about action with awareness and action with abandon. But he also describes the felt sense of action as either springing out of restlessness or springing out of stillness. And those are two completely different types of action. And the type of action that springs from stillness, as he describes it, is action that processes karma, that in other words, unravels or deals with karma. The whole thing about karma is we're trying to process our given load in a lifetime, and ideally, even more than our allotted load for this lifetime. I mean, I don't know if that's ideally or not, but that's certainly something that's possible. It's possible to take on an even greater karmic load than we might have originally intended in our life. And the benefit of that being that we're sort of lightening ourselves, we're freeing ourselves. It's not like, oh, I must process my karma because it's my duty to, that there's I think sometimes this notion of karma or the notion of processing it can, if we're not careful about how we frame it, it can turn into another imperative where all of a sudden we're feeling a real kind of like a tension around it. It can become another thing that feels heavy, as opposed to recognizing it as an opportunity for lightness, for freedom, for actually shedding and letting go. So, but anyway, back to the kind of like these two approaches that Sadhguru was talking about. Action that springs from stillness is like action that's just impelled by the moment. We're in the moment. We're at ease with the moment. And naturally, an action, or even a series of actions, but something clear, there'll be some clear step that the moment draws out of us. Action that springs from restlessness is not so much that, it's more the mind racing or throwing up various, oh, I should do that, oh, I should do that, oh, I should do that, oh, have you done this? Like that. I spoke about this a couple weeks ago in my post where I had this sense of sitting in meditation, and it was like I wanted to get up out of meditation and go do something to relieve the sort of tension, the kind of like discomfort of sitting still. And if there's discomfort in sitting still, a lot of times the action that we're taking is not so much being drawn out of us by the moment, by the necessity of the moment. It's not pure action or appropriate action. It's action for the sake of distraction. It's action for the sake of allowing us to take our awareness off of the thing that is maybe hard to sit with, or just causing some discomfort that we might need to that we might have an opportunity to embrace. It's not that we need to embrace it. It's not going anywhere. If we don't embrace it now, we'll get another chance later. But I think we can all kind of maybe identify that difference when the action is coming from a place of I just kind of want to move now. And this is where in my thinking about it, the ideas I was describing at the very top of this post, because this morning I was also, the conversation I had with my friend and client was all about physical activity and what role it plays in this deep inner work. And on one level, it might appear either kind of, at best, tangentially related, in that maybe there's physical aspects to spiritual work. Or at worst, it could seem like a distraction. It could seem like, well, going and, I don't know, going to the gym, being invested in that physical realm might seem like it is something that draws us away from the type of stillness and contemplative work that at least I often emphasize as part of spiritual work. And one thing that was really interesting to hear Sadhguru talk about is that most people have allotted for themselves more physical karma, more physical energy to process than they actually do process habitually in a modern lifestyle. So in other words, and the result of that, he said, is people who feel ADD. And you can imagine if your system, your actual, not just like, this isn't like some brain thing, this is like your spiritual body is wanting to process physical karma, wanting to have the experience of physical work, physical exertion, engaging with physical energy. And instead you sit in front of a computer or in a classroom, as a young person, in a classroom all day for years and years on end. What's likely to happen? Well, you're likely to start going like this. And there's going to be so much charged energy in the system that takes sitting in stillness, putting our focus on one thing. Come on, get out of here. There's no way it's going to work. Our system's is not in a place where it can do that. So what Sadhguru says is that the first 3 to 6 months at his foundation, which I guess is this place in India where people come and work with him or work on his methods or whatever. First 3 to 6 months, a lot of times, is people show up and they just do physical labor for months and just run themselves. They burn off that initial layer of excess physical energy that's not getting processed by the system, because before that, there's no point in trying to have someone sit in meditation, because their system's not ready for that. Their system is in a place where it's not able to do that. It has other needs that supersede the need to sit in quiet contemplative stillness. And I had the experience of coming off the mountain yesterday, right after I did my post, driving into town, and I just had this feeling like I felt like I was back in college and it was summertime. And I'm just I'm physically exerted, and I'm at ease. There was an ease in the just the way that the world felt. And I clocked that as something so significant in terms of putting me in a place where I could actually come to a genuine stillness. And then if we're talking about, back to the kind of first thing I talked about earlier, where Sadhguru talks about action from stillness and action from restlessness, you can see that there's a bit of there's a bit of subtlety going on here, because action from stillness, well, how can we first we have to get to stillness. Well, in order to get to stillness, we might need to take a bunch of action that takes place either from, I think, not necessarily from restlessness, but acknowledging that excess energy in the system. So in other words, I think the key that I take from this is, in my own life, because I know this from my own experience, if I don't physically move, if I don't physically use my body, I don't necessarily feel the physical impulse to move my body. That would be perfect if I did, because then I would always know, oh, that's what I need to go do. Instead, I feel a kind of buildup of mental agitation. And because I'm learning to translate my own impulses into usable information, I'm learning to go, don't get sidetracked by all this mental activity. Let's go do something physical. Be physical. That's what I did yesterday. I almost spent the morning sitting in my office writing, and I had some projects that I'm sort of like feeling some urgency around completing and taking the next step on. And I was like, I could use 2 or 3 hours to write, but then I was like, nope, go to the mountain and run the mountain, because I could tell there was a kind of like, it would have been action from restlessness, ironically, if I had sat at my office and worked. Whereas going to the mountain and just embracing the physical mountain and letting my system do that, letting my system be physical, was exactly what I needed. It was exactly the right thing to then bring me to a place where I can be in more stillness and I can be in more of a balanced state for the rest of my work. So that's that's how these two ideas have married in my psyche over the course of this morning. And I think it's just really important to keep that in mind. I said this on my post yesterday, but it kind of bears reminding ourselves that the insight is not going to come from the mind. The actual what our body needs to do, what our system needs to do, is very rarely going to come from the mind. It's going to come from listening on an even deeper level, and that's something that I feel like I'm just kind of learning how to do it. I still, like I said, I still don't necessarily, my body's not necessarily telling me, go be physical. It's kind of like the mind that gets trapped somewhere that I have to go, oh, I feel like I'm routing energy up here that doesn't necessarily need to be here. This is not what it's actually wanting to do. Can I breathe into my body? Can I feel the physical? Because as soon as I got on that mountain, my body was like, yes, let's do this. I'm here. It was like so happy to be there. But it's just tuning into that and learning to read the signals in advance, and really kind of learning to interpret our own energetic needs. It's like listening to a child and understanding what they need, except the child is us. The child is this body right here. And a child is actually kind of a nice metaphor, a nice image, because how we would never not give a child what they need. If we were able to identify it and we knew clearly this is what this child needs, we would never not give it to them. But with ourselves, we might be a little more stingy, or we might be a little more apt to, try and whip ourselves into shape. But it's the same issue. If we really listen to those impulses, there's something coming through on a deep level that we can actually interpret and then come up with a beneficial response. So that's what I'm offering myself and all of you today. Thanks for watching, people. Love you. Appreciate you so much. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.